The security footage from that Thursday afternoon still makes me laugh every time I watch it. 3 middle-aged suburbanites in matching polo shirts and cargo shorts were tiptoeing up my driveway like they were on some kind of covert mission. They carried clipboards, bolt cutters, and what appeared to be a crowbar wrapped in bubble wrap for some bizarre reason. The one leading the charge, wearing a sun visor that said HOA President in bedazzled letters, pointed at my side gate like she was directing troops to storm a fortress. What these would-be intruders didn't know was that my 12-year-old son, Ethan, was home alone that day. They also didn't know that Ethan had watched Home Alone approximately 47 times and had recently discovered my collection of action movies that I probably should have kept locked away a bit longer. My name is David Garrison, and I'm a single dad who made the catastrophic mistake of buying a house in Maple Ridge Estates about 18 months ago. The realtor had sold me on the whole peaceful, family-first community with high property values and friendly neighbors pitch. What she failed to mention was that the HOA here was run like a tiny dictatorship by a woman named Patricia Dawson, who treated the community handbook like it was holy scripture. My first transgression in Patricia's eyes happened 3 weeks after, moving in when I painted my front door a deep navy blue instead of one of the 4 approved shades of beige that apparently represented the pinnacle of suburban sophistication. Patricia Dawson was a 50-something-year-old woman who listed HOA president as her primary occupation on LinkedIn, right above certified life coach and wellness consultant. She commanded a small army of clipboard-wielding enforcers she called the Compliance Subcommittee, though everyone else called them the Lawn Police behind their backs. Her 2 main lieutenants were Harold Finch, a retired accountant who measured grass height with a ruler every Sunday morning, and Dolores Manning, whose claim to fame was successfully getting a family fined $800 for having their Christmas lights, up until January 2nd. The conflict between Patricia and me had been escalating for months over increasingly ridiculous violations. First, it was the door color, then the crime of planting roses instead of approved ornamental grasses, and most recently, the cardinal sin of having a basketball hoop in my driveway that was visible from the street. But things really went off. The rails when Patricia demanded an interior inspection of my garage to assess visual cohesion with the community aesthetic standards. When I politely but firmly declined, citing the fact that the HOA bylaws gave her exactly 0 authority to inspect the inside of my home. She narrowed her eyes and said in a voice dripping with venom that I would regret not cooperating with the board's reasonable requests. I had to leave for a 3-day business trip to Seattle the following week, and I arranged for Ethan to stay with his friend Jackson, who lived just 2 houses down. But Ethan, being the wonderfully stubborn kid he is, insisted he was old enough to stay home alone. After much negotiation, we compromised that he could stay at our house during the day, but would sleep at Jackson's at night. I showed him how all the security cameras worked, tested the alarm system with him, and made sure he had every emergency number programmed into his phone. What I didn't know was that Ethan had been secretly assembling what he called his emergency defense kit in the garage inspired by his favorite movie protagonists. According to the timestamps on our security footage, Patricia and her accomplices showed up exactly 1 hour and 14 minutes after my flight took off. They rang the doorbell first, then knocked progressively louder while Patricia shouted through the door that she had full authority under HOA Bylaw 14C to inspect and document both internal and external violations. Ethan, who was watching from the upstairs window, later told me he recognized this as the opening move of what he called a hostile infiltration attempt. While Patricia continued her verbal assault on my front door, Harold had wandered around to the side of the house with the bolt cutters, and Dolores was taking photos of my allegedly non-compliant mailbox. What happened next was pure 12-year-old genius mixed with questionable parenting on my part for letting him watch so many action movies. Ethan had apparently spent the previous evening setting up what he called perimeter defenses. The first victim was Harold, who attempted to cut the lock on my side gate. The moment he touched the gate, Ethan triggered the motion-activated sprinkler system he had modified to spray at face level instead of ground level. Harold stumbled backward, slipped on the strategically placed bar of soap Ethan had left on the walkway, and crashed into my recycling bins with a tremendous clatter. Patricia, hearing the commotion, marched around to investigate and stepped directly onto the welcome mat Ethan had coated with honey and cooking oil. Her designer sandals immediately lost all traction, sending her sliding forward into a rake that had been positioned exactly like in the cartoons. The rake handle swung up and smacked her in the forehead, causing her to stumble backward into what looked like an innocent pile of autumn leaves, but was actually covering a kiddie pool filled with a mixture of maple syrup and chocolate sauce that Ethan had concocted for maximum stickiness. Dolores, attempting to help Patricia out of the sticky trap, triggered the piece to resistance of Ethan's defensive measures. He had rigged a confetti cannon, the kind used at birthday parties, to a tripwire across the garden path. But instead of regular confetti, he had filled it with a combination of biodegradable glitter, flour, and what appeared to be an entire bottle of my cologne. The explosion covered Dolores from head to toe in sparkly perfumed dust that immediately began mixing with the water from the still-active sprinklers to form a pastel-like substance. At this point, any reasonable person would have retreated, but Patricia was not a reasonable person. Covered in chocolate syrup and maple syrup with leaves stuck to every part of her body, she demanded that Harold and Dolores follow her to the back door. Harold, still dripping wet and now sporting an impressive bruise on his shin from the recycling bin incident, reluctantly produced the crowbar wrapped in bubble wrap. Patricia later claimed in court that the bubble wrap was to prevent property damage, which even the judge found laughably ironic given that they were attempting breaking and entering. As they approached the back door, Ethan executed his masterstroke. He had programmed our smart home system with what he called the intruder alert protocol. The moment they touched the door handle, every speaker in the house began blaring police sirens at maximum volume. The outdoor speakers started playing aggressive dog barking sounds that Ethan had downloaded from the internet, including what sounded like an entire pack of very angry Rottweilers. But the best part was the automated voice that boomed through. The neighborhood announcing intruder alert. All cameras are recording. Law enforcement has been automatically contacted. Please smile for your mugshot. The 3 would-be intruders scattered like startled pigeons. Patricia tried to run, but slipped again in her syrup-covered sandals and had to crawl across my lawn to reach the sidewalk. Harold attempted to vault over my fence, but got his cargo shorts caught on the top and had to abandon them entirely, fleeing in his tidy witties while clutching his clipboard for modesty. Dolores, still resembling a craft store explosion, tried to maintain some dignity by power-walking away. But the trail of glitter she left behind made her path easy to follow all the way back to her house 3 blocks away. What none of them knew was that Ethan had not actually called 911 yet. He wanted to make sure he had all the evidence properly saved first. The kid methodically downloaded all the security footage, created a backup on a flash drive, and even edited together a highlight reel with dramatic music before calling the police. When the officers arrived 15 minutes later, Ethan greeted them at the door wearing a suit and tie he had put on specifically for the occasion, handed them a printed copy of the HOA bylaws with the sections about trespassing and property rights, highlighted in 5 different colors, and offered them fresh-baked cookies his friend's mom had just brought over. By the time my plane landed in Seattle, my phone had approximately 47 missed calls, 63 text messages, and my email inbox was having what could only be described as a complete nervous breakdown. The first voicemail was from the police department, informing me that my son was safe and had provided them with comprehensive video evidence of an attempted break-in. The second was from Ethan himself, calmly stating that he had handled a home security situation and that I shouldn't worry because he had followed all the protocols we discussed. The remaining 45 voicemails were from various neighbors, HOA board members, and one very panicked lawyer representing the HOA who begged me to call him back immediately. The police report was a thing of beauty. It described Patricia Dawson, Harold Finch, and Dolores Manning as the perpetrators of attempted breaking and entering, criminal trespassing, and attempted burglary. The officer who wrote it even included a note about the defendants being covered in various food substances and glitter at the time of questioning, which significantly undermined their claims of conducting legitimate HOA business. Patricia tried to argue that she had authority under the bylaws, but when the police actually read the bylaws she kept citing, they found nothing that permitted forced entry into a homeowner's property. The story hit the local news that evening with the headline, "HOA President Arrested After 12-Year-Old Foils Break-In Attempt." The news crew interviewed Ethan in our driveway, and I let him wear his sunglasses and leather jacket for the interview. When the reporter asked him what message he had for other potential intruders, Ethan looked directly into the camera and said in his most serious voice that this was his house, and he would defend it against all threats, foreign and domestic. The video went viral within hours, and someone even created a remix with action movie music that got over 1 million views. The emergency HOA board meeting 3 days later was standing room only. I had returned from my trip early and attended with my lawyer, though we barely needed to say anything. The homeowners were in full revolt. One by one, they stood up to share their own stories of Patricia's overreach and harassment. The vote to remove Patricia from the board wasn't even close. Out of 123 votes cast, 100